Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is day 127, July the 9th, 2017, Sunday. Thank you for tuning in. Well, I just wanted to keep this video today, Sunday, kind of short. I just want to comment on the Trump-Putin meeting because that's pretty much dominating the news today. It was a primary topic on all the news programs this morning, and as you would expect, you had the usual cast of characters across the liberal media, and along with John McCain and Lindsey Graham both had to chime in and basically criticize Trump and say that Putin won and he beat up on Trump and this type of thing. So yeah, definitely going after Trump and trying to say that that Putin had the upper hand in this conversation, which is kind of ridiculous because no one really knows exactly what they discussed in the 2-hour long meeting. We only have just a few, all we have is just a simple statement from Tillerson, gave about a 3-minute interview. Donald Trump made just a single couple sentence statement on it, which he said it was tremendous. And, you know, so much of it, we don't know what happened, other than Tillerson basically said, yeah, the very first thing Trump did was confront Putin on the hacking, the elections. They talked a little bit about Syria and Ukraine. As far as sanctions, they didn't really talk specifically about the sanctions or anything like that, other than the fact that that as long as the Russians continue what they're doing in Syria and in Ukraine, they don't see getting the sanctions lifted. They didn't really get into a lengthy discussion about that. They just kind of talked about it. So the sanctions were not really on the table that much to talk about. But you know what's really interesting about this is that Trump and Putin are really very similar type of individuals. They are both extreme alpha males. They both are very much populist, nationalist types of leaders. They're very much on the nationalist side. Trump is definitely America first. Putin is Russia first. These are guys who love their countries and who are looking out for the best interest of their own countries. They're already both rich. They don't need to steal anybody's money. They already both have a lot of power. They don't really need to do anything to do that. Trump, of course, won in the manner that he did. And, of course, Putin has about an 80% popularity rating in Russia. So these are two pretty powerful leaders, alpha types, and very similar types of individuals, have a lot in common. And, of course, you know, if we go back to where looking at the campaign and the way Trump talked about wanting to improve relations with Russia, and of course we know that Michael Flynn was one of his main advisors during the campaign, and he was probably, I'm sure, giving Trump a lot of information about, hey, you know, we spent too much time demonizing the Russians and this and that and the other thing. And so Flynn was also kind of on that same train where it would be better to work with the Russians and deal with the main issue, which is the terrorist problem. And then the other issues that we have between Russia and the U.S. will always be there. We're always going to have areas in Eastern Europe where we're going to run up against the Russians and what is in their best interest and what is in our best interest. Of course, there's a lot of energy issues involved, national security issues involved. So it's a very complex thing. But, you know, I would love to have been a fly on the wall anyway, to be there for those meetings because, you know, you had Trump and Tillerson and you had Putin and Lavrov. And then, of course, you had the translators. So those are really the only people that really know what happened there. But, you know, it's kind of a shame, and I assume that I have not heard that Putin and Trump ever had any personal one-on-one time together. It's very possible. It's just not being reported. I was kind of trying to find that out. But, you know, I'm not really sure that they could do too much because of the language barrier. Putin, of course, we know Trump doesn't speak Russian. Putin's English. He does understand English. He can speak some English, but it's for the longest time, forever really, Putin is not someone who will ever speak English when he's dealing in serious high-level discussions with American diplomats or British diplomats or anything like that, only because he doesn't have a good enough command of the language, enough confidence in his ability to express his points in English. He wants to be 100% sure that he, is clear on what his points are when he's making them. And I just guess when he's speaking in English, he doesn't have a command enough of the language that he feels comfortable using it. So he always would use a translator, certainly with Obama and Bush, although I think there were times when he did speak a little English to Bush. So, and he has spoken English to some reporters before, but it's usually just basic comments. He doesn't get into any lengthy, serious discussions about policy, diplomacy, or anything like that in English. So it's unlikely that Trump and Putin would be able to sit down and have a meaningful conversation in English, probably just because Putin doesn't feel comfortable using the language. But it's funny because I'm sure that somewhere in that conversation they had to discuss the fact that these are two guys that are really under attack by the same people, the same group of swamp monsters who are attacking Trump, who tried to destroy his candidacy and his presidency. The people who are still working against him now are the exact same people who have been going after Putin for years and have labeled Putin and Russia public enemy number one. And I think that Trump and Putin both understand this. Certainly Lavrov does, and I would assume Rex Tillerson as well probably understands this. So I think there's certain things that are known or understood between these guys that they really couldn't talk much about, again, because they're not in a secure enough setting. And of course you do have these individuals who are translators who are present as well, and you can probably never know what they may do as far as leaking things or what have you. So I think there's some conversations that Putin and Trump maybe would have liked to have had that they couldn't have, but I think there's just a certain understanding that they don't necessarily have to say certain things in a certain way. I think there's a certain understanding between Putin and Trump that they are both being attacked by the same people, and that a lot of the pressure that's being brought on Trump regarding Putin and the Russians is part of the larger overall scheme for the United States and their foreign policy goals, which is to demonize Russia and Putin. And I think that there's a kind of a general understanding between Putin and Trump that this is the case. So we have learned that from Putin's statement and from other reports that one of the very first things Trump said was, when he got the meeting started, was that he wanted to deal with the meddling in the elections issue and get that out of the way. And apparently he did. Putin even says that Trump went into a fairly extensive conversation with him about the meddling, in which case Putin has basically told Trump that that they were not meddling in the elections. Of course, all countries meddle in other countries' elections, and I'm sure including Russia to some degree meddling in our elections, but whether or not they have any great effect without actually getting the CIA or the one of their intelligence agencies involved, whether they're actually flipping votes or whether they're actually running campaigns to destroy a candidate or throw stuff into the mix or whatever. It's just one of these things that has always gone on and always will go on. It's something that has to be expected, but in the past we've never allowed these things to interfere in moving forward with other forms of diplomacy that you have to pursue. You can't just say, well, we think the Russians hacked the election and therefore we're just going to shut off all communication. We're not going to have anything to do with them. We're going to put sanctions on them, and we're just going to go back into the dark days of the Cold War or the Soviet Union. Modern day Russia and Putin are nothing like the old Soviet Union. Nothing alike. But Putin basically continues to deny that they had any interference in the elections. Whether or not Trump believes that, my guess is he probably doesn't. But he's raised the issue with Putin, and Putin obviously knows where Trump stands on that. But Putin did say to Trump, he said, hey, we keep hearing about it. Show us the evidence. Show us the evidence. And that means taking a look at those servers. And so far, it doesn't appear that, for whatever reason, that Mr. Mueller wants to take a look at those servers, or if he does, he's not using the authority that he has to look at those servers. We did have Trey Gowdy appearing on Fox News this past Wednesday, where he also has now joined the larger and larger group of voices in Washington who are questioning this issue about the servers and why they're not being looked at. I wonder if the pressure will finally be great enough on Mueller that he'll go have to take a look at those servers, because if he wants proof, and this is what Putin is saying, give us the proof, show us where we meddled or hacked your elections or whatever, and I guess we'll admit to it. So this point is left kind of hanging in the air until someone actually looks at that server and proves it, besides crowdsource or CrowdStrike. Now, another funny thing is, I'm sure that Putin probably, once Trump got through talking about the meddling and the elections, I'm sure that absolutely 100% sure, because I've heard Putin comment on it before, as well as Lavrov, I'm sure they didn't let the point go without making it perfectly clear to Donald Trump that there has been massive meddling, not just in their elections in Russia for the past 15, 20 years, or going all the way back to Boris Yeltsin, where essentially the Clinton White House ran Boris Yeltsin's second campaign, his re-election campaign. And remember, it was Boris Yeltsin who hand-picked Vladimir Putin. Now, I'm sure that Putin brought this point up with Trump too and said, hey, well, since you're talking about, us being involved in your elections, how about we talk about all the involvement that you have, not just in our elections, but our internal politics on a daily basis. I'm sure he reminded Trump that he had to kick all the NGOs out of Russia, most of them funded by groups associated with George Soros, working together with American and British and European intelligence agencies to undermine Putin and Trump. They are also the leading backers and financial backers of the Atlanticists. The Atlanticists are a group of global elitists in Russia that despise Putin and are, of course, on a daily basis trying to destroy him. They are deeply connected to the West and the Western intelligence agencies and people like George Soros and people with the European Union and others. So I'm sure that Putin and Lavrov probably gave Tillerson and Trump an earful of exactly how they are being meddled with by the U.S. And he probably said the same thing to Trump as, yeah, take a look at it, but also maybe take a look at what you guys are doing in our country and see if maybe you aren't doing exactly what you're accusing us of doing. I'm absolutely sure that Putin raised this point, as well as Lavrov, because we've heard both of them do it before, openly at the UN and in other press conferences that they have done. So it's ironic in a way that both Trump and Putin understand that they're under attack by the same people. The same people who are attacking Trump here are the exact same people that are attacking Putin. So they share a common enemy, and this common enemy has been working very hard to drive a wedge between the United States and Russia and to run this Russia-Trump narrative, which is false, to make it very difficult for Trump and Putin and Russia and the United States to move forward, resolve our differences, and work together in the areas where we can actually do some good for each other. Now, both Trump and Putin did acknowledge this in this meeting. They both understand that they're under attack by the same people. And so while there are certain things that probably can't be said in certain words, certainly I bet there's an understanding between Trump and Putin that this is the case. But clearly coming away from this, Trump has basically said, hey, look, I've raised the issue with him. He knows where we stand. But the fact of the matter is, it's time to move forward. Putin has basically said the same thing. He took issue with us on the Russian meddling in the election. We told them, hey, we didn't do it. Show us the proof. And hey, don't forget you do it to us. Not to mention just to us, but the Russians, Lavrov and Putin, can both go, especially Lavrov, can go down the list of the last 50 or 55 years of American history, showing all the elections that the U.S. has been involved in meddling in, including the overthrow of governments, the assassination of political figures, and various other things. So America is not in a situation, nor is the American president in a situation where you can get too heavy-handed in this particular line of reasoning, because we're as guilty as hell. Trump knows it. Putin knows it. Unfortunately, the dishonest media knows it. John McCain knows it. Lindsey Candy Pants Graham knows it. But they will never talk about American election, because as far as they're concerned, American exceptionalism means we can overthrow governments, we can interfere in elections, we can interfere in internal politics, and that's okay, because we're the good guys, and we only have the best intentions at heart. Putin and the Russians, on the other hand, when they involve themselves in another election, or the Brits or the Europeans or anyone else, oh, that's not good, because they're not the exceptional country. So this is kind of how the whole narrative overshadowed the Trump-Putin meetings. But I believe that there is kind of a camaraderie between Putin and Trump to some extent, that they're both under attack by the same people, and I think they both understand it, and I don't think they had to say it. I think it's something that's understood between them. Another thing that was quite funny is at one point when they were, after they had their first initial meeting and the big handshake and that whole thing, there was a bunch of journalists out there with the cameras and stuff like that, filming and stuff. And at one point, Putin leans down, and I believe he said it in English, and said to Trump, pointed out to the journalists and said, "Are those the ones who are trying to hurt you?" and Trump looked at Putin and nodded his head and said, "Yeah, these are some of the guys that are trying to hurt me. You're absolutely right." So it's funny that Putin would point out, just like the Polish president came out and made his statement about we all need to fight fake news. That had to drive CNN just absolutely nuts to hear the Polish president describe them as fake news when they made a big to-do over the Polish First Lady skipping by Donald Trump to shake Melania's hand first. It's simply procedure that they do in Poland. The First Lady shakes the First Lady's hand, and then she shakes the President's hand, and vice versa. But the media had a big to-do about that, and the Polish president made a statement afterwards saying, yeah, we got to fight the fake news media together. So he stuck up for Trump there. I thought that was pretty good. And Putin did basically the same thing by pointing at the journalists and saying, are those the people that are trying to hurt you? Because they're the same people that attack Putin every day. And so this is what I mean. But Putin did ask for proof, and Donald Trump, it's funny because Donald Trump is saying the exact same thing, and Putin knows this. Donald Trump's, of course, been tweeting about the server, tweeting about Podesta, tweeting about these things, and asking the same question that Putin's asking. Hey, why don't we, and even Trump is even questioning, how much interference Russia had, or whether or not it's all true, that's what he's being told, but he's not really seeing the hardcore evidence. So he's been told some things, he's seen some things, but he knows how the deep state and the intelligence agencies can manipulate things, and Trump is no fool, neither is Putin. But I certainly would love to have been a fly on the wall, to have been, in listening range of that meeting. And it is a shame, I think, that Putin and Trump do not speak a similar language that they can communicate in, that Putin would feel comfortable communicating in. Now, Melania could probably carry on a conversation with Putin because he speaks fluent German, and so does she. And she did sit right next to him at the dinner. So it's very possible that Trump could have used Melania. He could have said, hey, Melania, when you're sitting next to Trump, you speak, or when you're sitting next to Putin, you speak great German, so does he. Tell him this in German, So it's very possible that Trump could have used Melania to send some small messages to Putin about the fact that Trump understands they're under attack by the same people are out to get him. Their relationship or their attempt to have a working relationship is there are people attempting to foil that and spoil that any way they possibly can. They do not want to see the United States and Russia as partners, friends, allies, or anything else. The deep state needs Russia to be the enemy of the world and the enemy of America, and that's why they'll never let off this narrative But again, I think Trump and Putin are very smart. I think they understand how they have to play the game, and I think they'll continue to play the game. They will continue to use rhetoric and continue to be forceful against one another, while at the same time, I think they both will in other ways work together, and they'll really try to do each other. They'll try not to do any harm to each other, and they probably will try to work together and make some progress in the situation in Ukraine, in Crimea, and in Syria. I think that I think also that because the meeting lasted 2 hours, and we already know about how Lavrov responds to these things, because when him and Tillerson had their press conference back earlier in the year, we saw the way that Lavrov handled every one of these issues with Syria and everything else. He takes you down memory lane. He takes you down memory lane in a little trip on history. In fact, it cites a lot of facts and things and such. And Lavrov's a very smooth character who actually speaks very good English, and much better or more comfortable with it than Putin. So I imagine that Tillerson and Lavrov may have had maybe more meaningful conversations in some of these areas. When you get talking about Crimea, Lavrov can make and Putin can make a very strong case for their annexing of Crimea. They can make a very strong case for their support for eastern Ukraine. They can make a very strong case for their support of Assad in Syria. They have a very strong standing in these positions, and they have interests. And of course, I think Trump and Tillerson both understand that. And I think that there was probably. I think these are areas where what Trump can do publicly or through the Congress in the current environment he lives in, it's fairly limited. But I think Putin understands this, and I think vice versa. So I think that there's going to be a lot more going on as we move forward with Putin and Russia versus Trump and Tillerson. I think there's going to be a lot more going on that will be unsaid, unspoken. I think the rhetoric we're going to hear is not going to back up exactly what is really happening in that relationship. And I think as Trump is more successful at defeating the Russian narrative, and as events continue to move forward, especially if we can get a very good resolution in Syria. They have agreed to a ceasefire, but I think that there's some real positive opportunities for progress there. And once Trump makes it through this period, especially if he does well in the midterms, and especially if he is reelected, it is something that he in his second term could really do to reset relations with Russia, because it will give him some time to defeat the Russian narrative and get rid of a lot of the swamp creatures that are creating a lot of the problems, to continue the anti-Russian, anti-Putin narrative. So I think that my take on it is it was very good. It's a step in the right direction. It's a move toward progress with the Russians, which is what we need. And I think that Putin and Trump probably have a bit of an understanding, and I believe that most of it is unspoken. But I think we'll just have to watch it moving forward. But I would say overall, on Trump's meeting with Putin, it was very successful. His entire trip was very successful, as was his last foreign policy trip. And we see that Trump is much more popular, and his policies are much more popular in Europe than we are being led to believe. Merkel and her friends at the UN, those snickering fools who were snickering as Trump was making his speech to them, they're getting a dose of some very bad medicine, because as we saw from some of the polls that were out, a lot of these positions that Trump takes here in the U.S. for American policy on immigration, on taxation, freedom of the press, and various things like that, calling out the media, these are all things that are very, very popular with European citizens as well. They understand the importance of a sound immigration policy. These people are nationalists. They don't want to see their country taken over by foreign cultures. They also understand that they have a crippling, lying criminal media, just like we do. So Trump's Russia trip, his meeting with Putin, the speech in Poland, his previous trip in the Middle East. Very, very successful. And it's amazing that when you go through the TV channels this morning, or in my case, watching on the internet, looking at CNN, MSNBC, Fox, even Fox, all negative, all 100% negative. Trump, Trump got beaten up by Putin. Putin got the best of him. This and that and the other thing. Of course, they had to have John McCain and Lindsey Graham. They had to have them on, of course. Neither of which would have been able to do anything differently than what Trump did. You can't push Putin and the Russians around. They are a regional power, and they're going to do what they're going to do. And so, anyway, 2 thumbs up for Trump. He did a fantastic job, and I think that there'll be good things coming in the future from with respect to U.S.-Russia relations, despite the fact that the deep state will try to sabotage both Trump and Putin and any chance of having good relations. I think we just have to be patient and let it play itself out. And I especially think that if Trump gets a second term, it could be his biggest foreign policy success, is that we could see a real cooperation between the United States and Russia, and a real understanding that the Russians have national security and economic security interest as well, and that we need to be respectful of that while defending our interest in the region. I think this is where this is all going to go, and I think it's going to end up being a huge foreign policy success for Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin in the long term. They just have to get through this difficult period now, battling the swamp monsters as we do every day here on TowerGate. And that's what we got for today. Happy Sunday. Thank you for tuning in. Day 127, July the 9th, 2017, Sunday. If you have any comments about your feelings about Putin and Trump, and what you think about that relationship, or how the media has badly played their hand again, please put that in the comment section. I certainly love reading it. Thanks, you guys. Take care. Bye.